Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So today's video we're going to be talking about another character in Marvel Concept Champions. That's right, this is an episode of Marvel Concept Champion character breakdown. It has been few days or maybe a bit more since I released the last video in this series. But that being said, we're back at it, and today we're going to be discussing one of Captain America's favorite lackeys or sidekicks, so to speak, and that will be Winter Soldier. Now, Winter Soldier has several different kind of like origin versions, but he's always been connected with Captain America and also obviously Hydra and Hydra's experiments and that whole program. All that being said, let's just jump to the next scene and discuss everything that is Winter Soldier in Marvel Concept Champions. And let's start with the very bare basics. So his name is Winter Soldier. He's of skill class, which is also still kind of like actually debatable because he still has somewhat similar version to Captain America's serum in him, which is a science champion, and obviously he has the metallic arm, which could kind of slide into tech category, but Kabam decided to go with skill, which is fair enough. So since the game has existed, Winter Soldier has always been classed as a skill champion. He's size medium, and his only notable tags would be mercenary and metal. That's right, unlike an MCU, he isn't really considered to be like part of the good guys or part of the Avengers. Neither he's classed as a villain, and that is kind of like partially due to the mercenary tag. Now, mercenary tag in this game has always been used quite questionably, because if you mark somebody as a mercenary, then they do not get benefits of a hero champions. For instance, he doesn't get attack boost from Nick Fury, Synergies, so on and so forth, but he also doesn't get the penalties of champions who have enhanced abilities against villains, such as most famously probably Blade and his Danger Sense. Now, being a mercenary in my head does not necessarily kind of like relieve you of moral responsibility, and you should still get classed in a hero or villain category. If you ask me, for instance, Sabretooth in this game is solely classed as a mercenary type. He doesn't have a hero or villain tag, but as we all know, Sabretooth is a huge douche and a murderer, and in vast majority of the Marvel lore, he almost always appears as a complete jack of villain, but for reasons unknown to us, he's missing that villain tag in the game. And Winter Soldier is kind of like similar case, but in his case, I suppose his history is more complicated and he has danced in between both sides. But all that being said, let's just move on, and let's move on to his damage output. Now, his original damage output and his base damage output without any synergies is fairly mediocre, probably subpar at this point and quite outdated. Now, he is one of the older champions in game as well, and that means his ability set isn't all that long or impressive. However, not many people know that he has had a revamp since he was released. Most of the people probably will not remember the time when he actually had level 2 the same as Iron Fist, for instance, currently, and Kabam did update that, plus added some other abilities, changed his signature ability that allowed him to power drain. But the most notable change to Winter Soldier would definitely be quintessential Killmonger synergy, which kind of significantly increased the value of Winter Soldier when Killmonger got released. And because the synergy is so important, I'm just going to kind of like discuss it straight up. So basically, if you have 5 or 6 star Killmonger, you gain 5% attack increase per every hit on your combo meter. So effectively, you gain 500% increased attack with Winter Soldier if you have 5 or 6 star Killmonger. 4 star Killmonger has 2% increase, and 3 star I believe has 1. But yeah, the 5 or 6 star synergy is the one that you really want, that let Winter Soldier actually dish out some serious damage. Later on in this video, I'll actually try and have a go in a Labyrinth of Legends against Star-Lord and see how far I can make it. Now, who knows, maybe we can get the solo, maybe I get my face smacked in, but I'm going to be doing it live, so who knows. Now, delivery method, as I mentioned, his main damage would be the ramp up via Killmonger synergy. So basically, the higher your combo meter up to 100 hits, the more damage you deal. He also has access to bleed debuffs on his special attacks and incinerate as well, depending on what kind of ammunition you load up in him. Basically, he has incendiary rounds, which place incinerate on opponents. He has rounds that ignore armor in opponents, and he has bullets that basically kind of strengthen his bleed debuffs. And unlike, for instance, Star-Lord, you can actually control which ammunition you are using by dashing back and holding block, but it's still not the most practical method, but it's something that many more champions in the game should have, in my opinion, to take away the randomness aspect of it. Now, let's talk about him as opponent, and he is fairly unremarkable as opponent, as most people probably know, because he's pretty much everybody's favorite punching bag in Realm of Legends, just because he so happens to be first fight in there. However, his special 2 is pretty much hard or close to impossible to fully dex, so in serious fights that implies that you're gonna have unavoidable block damage if you ever push him to special 2. Therefore, kind of like the Bible rule of fighting Winter Soldiers always is just bait out level 1, punish that, and never push him to level 2. All other than that, his level 1 is relatively easy to dex. Now, it is a projectile that you do need to kind of like know the timing of, but it is just kind of like 2 bullets, and the hitboxes are really close to each other, so it's very simple to dex. And yeah, there is not much kind of like else going on with him defensively. No evades, no auto blocks, no phasing, none of that stuff. So he's a very simple, kind of like outdated vanilla opponent to fight against. Now, his utility, notable utilities would be again the power drain. Power drain is kind of like semi-frequent, but it is unreliable as it is RNG based. Now, he has a Taskmaster synergy that increases his chance of power draining, but he still cannot compete to most popular power draining options such as like Magic or Dormammu or Vision or whoever, because there you have a guarantee, you know that effect will take place. Now, with Winter Soldier, it can be handy because it's very like low effort power drain, because it happens on your basic attacks or your special attacks. Basically any hit has a set % chance to power drain the opponent, but the fact that you cannot control it also means that you cannot rely on it. Therefore, he is widely not considered realistically as a power drain champion. Unfortunately, also power draining opponents in certain fights at times when you do not want or do not plan for it can make the fight significantly more difficult. For instance, if opponent is stun immune and you are in a rhythm of pushing opponents to level 1 and punishing those level 1s, using that opening as kind of like your main entry point in the fight to deal damage, and then you power drain opponent in your last hit, and then you have to kind of like work around that and try a different way how to get damage in, whether to intercept the opponent or bait out heavy attack or whatever. So power draining uncontrollably is not always necessarily a good thing. Now, as well, his ramp up damage does make him quite useful for lower tier content where utility is not as necessary, and he can put in solid amount of work. For instance, in Act 5.3 in any chapter, if you have Killmonger Synergy, then despite having the 50% attack penalty, having this huge damage ramp up potential kind of makes him like Star-Lord. For instance, Star-Lord, when 5.3 initially came out, was an absolute MVP in the aspect that you could bring him in every of the quests, and even if Star-Lord has his damage halved, he still gained significant damage ramp up and kind of like made the fights reasonably short compared to other champions of different classes with the same attack penalty. Same as kind of Guillotine 2099 has been an absolute MVP on my baby account in 5.3 just because of that huge damage ramp up, and Winter Soldier would be as well if I had Killmonger Synergy. So that is kind of like very important. I think the fact that his damage ceiling is quite high, and for the content where you are going in and kind of like punching up scale, as in if your roster isn't as well developed but you need access to a high damage output champion, Winter Soldier can potentially be one of those options for you. Now, notable uses, Variant 1 actually still to this day quite highly values Winter Soldier. I remember when Variant 1 came out, Winter Soldier and Killmonger was kind of like my MVPs for the entire first chapter. Because of the damage output, you could kind of out-damage Masochism, you could kind of out-damage the buffet nodes, that power drain was occasionally helpful as well. And yeah, Winter Soldier was actually one of the kind of like more solid options to deal with those robots, for instance, because in Variant 1 you had to deal with a lot of those Ultron drones that are like bleed immune, and if there's something that Skill and Mutant class had in common is that they're reliant on bleed damage for very many champions, and Winter Soldier just kind of got around it with his huge damage ramp up. And again, early game questing is quite good and important place for Winter Soldier, I suppose, because as I mentioned before, his damage ramp up with Killmonger Synergy will be significantly better than many other champions that you could potentially use. And if you are again running relatively low ranked version of Winter Soldier, he's still capable of dealing with a lot of longer fights relatively quickly. But unfortunately, outside of kind of like early gameplay and variant 1, he doesn't really have much use in AQ, AW, Act 6, so on and so forth, just because there are better options out there, unfortunately. Just like Star-Lord is outdated for most of the content. For instance, you don't really see Star-Lord tearing up variants 2, 3, 4. You don't really see Star-Lord being used in Act 6 much, or Alliance War or Alliance Quest. Same as with Winter Soldier. He has the damage and the ramp-up damage, but he doesn't have too much of utility. Therefore, there's pretty much always better options for late endgame scenarios where very specific champion requirements need to be met. Now, his synergies, as I mentioned before, and have been talking about, Killmonger synergy is like an absolute must to make this champion even somewhat worthwhile and viable. With Killmonger synergy, especially as 5 or 6 star Killmonger, he can do a lot of damage. He can ramp up and deal very solid amount of damage. And Taskmaster, oh, I have a typo there, my bad, I'll correct it. That's what happens when I type this out in a rush. Improves power drain. So yeah, Taskmaster synergy helps his power drain be kind of like more frequent, but still it's a very random, very RNG based power drain, and it's nowhere near kind of like good enough to be reliant of that power drain. So let's just quickly dish out the verdict of this character. So albeit Winter Soldier has had his rework, unfortunately Bucky is still outdated. Killmonger's synergy sparked new life into him, but it simply isn't enough to be relevant in today's meta. Now he has his uses in like early content, early questing. Like I have on my new account one of my first 5 stars Winter Soldier, but unfortunately I don't have Killmonger. If I do happen to pull a 5 or 6 star Killmonger relatively early on, it is possible that I will end up using Winter Soldier for something and actually rank him up and clear a lot of content. But still at the same time, as I keep pulling new champions, the chance of Winter Soldier actually getting ramped up and seeing a lot of use is getting slimmer and slimmer with every crystal pool that they open. So unfortunately, even though he is very kind of like old and fan favorite and a big character in MCU, he doesn't serve too much relevance in endgame currently. Now let us jump to the game itself. Now I have selected Labyrinth of Legends, and this is going to be a tricky one because I did have to use like full-on attack synergy in order to make sure that Winter Soldier goes past 2000 base attack, and obviously the Killmonger synergy to increase his attack, and I have Suicide Mastery active as well. Let's see whether that's going to be my downfall, but let's see how this fight goes with Star-Lord. So now I obviously have to be careful with the evades, and that is one of the scarier things. Because, yeah, if I lose my combo, then my damage output obviously significantly drops down. But at the same time, we can see that every hit that lands on the Star-Lord is hitting harder and harder and harder. Now, I will use some level 2s initially to help me ramp up quicker. And again, in this fight is one of those examples where I realistically hope never to see that power drain, because I want to rely on so there we had power drain at the wrong moment, threw you off your game immediately. Okay, let's go again. Let's blast the level 2. Now we are at 71 hit combo. We're about to hit as hard as we're ever gonna hit with this rank 1 6 star Winter Soldier. Just need to focus a bit, don't want to get creamed early on. But 10k medium crit, that's not bad at all for a 6 star rank 1 character, no class advantage. Solid amount of damage there if you ask me. So I'm going to go for this level 2, and now we're crossing past 100 hit mark. So this is our max damage output now, with no class advantage, no class disadvantage. 10k mediums, it's not bad at all. Obviously there are champions who can hit harder, and as soon as I said it, I lost the combo. So let's try and build it again. Let's try and be careful. I'm probably not going to be able to get in the full solo anymore. I'm going to be dropping level 3s instead then, I guess. And yeah, that power drain is making this fight definitely more tricky as well. I wonder how interesting he would be if he wouldn't be limited to a ramp up of 100 hits. If he could ramp up like Star-Lord, like 400 hits. I think that would be quite a bit more interesting, but hey. Let's just see where we end up here. We're back at 40 combo, so... And I messed up, an intercept. Okay, so that was a quite horrible fight, quite bad fight. Let's try to do this again. I don't want to stretch out the video too long though, so... I'll just give it a one more go to see if I can do any better, because yeah, those awaits are always a problem with champions that rely on their combo meters. That's like the biggest problem of Star-Lord, for instance, as well. But in case of Winter Soldier, obviously it's even trickier to keep that combo, because you can never know when you're gonna end up power draining your opponent, and then you're gonna have to look for alternative opening. But hopefully I can manage to make use of some good dashback intercepts. Hopefully RNGs is in my favor as well in this fight, and I do not power drain him when I don't need to, and he doesn't evade too much. Let's go. Gonna need to focus a bit, so apologies for lack of commentary, I suppose. Let's go for that level 2. Hopefully that pushes him to a bar of power. No, it doesn't. Let's hit his block a couple times. There we go. Okay, let's see what happens. No power drain. That's fine. Again, I'm always hoping that power drain doesn't kick in. Man, how many times he can evade though? He does have that evade turned up on 11, man. But it's alright. Okay, now I'm past 100 combo. Come on, 10 hit mediums, not bad. Go for dashback. 20k first hit, man. That did sting, man. That special did some decent damage, because quite a lot of hits in there. You can also see how it would be extremely problematic to try and dex that. Ooh, that was risky. Man, it's so kind of like scary even to fight with Winter Soldier, because you never know when that power drain is gonna kick in, and you really don't want it to kick in. Because yeah, in Labyrinth, most kind of like common opening method is always that punishing the special attack. And I messed up dashback intercept. Hey, we did some solid amount of damage, so if I'm gonna quit now, oh no, not quit, I'm gonna get hit on purpose again. So I just want to see the stats of how much damage we managed to do. Okay, he KO'd me. And 186 hits, and he's at 2.6 mil. So I think it's fairly solid, considering that if you ramp it up and if you maintain it above 100, then you kind of like have this increased damage output throughout. But obviously it's kind of evident that there are better options, for instance, for Labyrinth in general, just because of that unpredictability of weight and power and so on and so forth. But yeah, that will do for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys have a bit more idea of what Winter Soldier is in this game and what he can do. And if you liked today's video, then here's some Baby Yoda spitting out a frog for you. Why not? If you didn't like today's video, well then you can show yourselves out. Absolutely no problem there. But yeah, that is me done for today. Whoa, what happened to that? There we go. So that is me done for today, and I'll catch you guys soon. See ya.